Welcome back to Divorce After 50. Today, we're speaking directly to the men in our audience. Divorce after 50 can feel like hitting a wall emotionally, spiritually, and personally. And for men of faith, the questions run even deeper. Where do I go from here? And what does God say about this? Is it too late to rebuild? Joining me today is John Pearson, a man of faith, a mentor, and someone who's walked the hard road of divorce and found God's grace along the way. He's also the creator of the YouTube channel and the author of a 3-volume series titled The Spirit, the Scribe, the Journal. And I've got those journals right here. I look forward to getting into them. And just want to welcome John to the show.
Well, thank you, Shari. It's a pleasure being here.
John, I'd love to start with your story. What was going through your mind as you faced divorce later in life?
Well, it was unexpected, but you just kind of feel it coming. My wife, at the time, I found out later, she had changed her mind about getting married, but went ahead and did it. And so she came into the marriage not wholehearted. So about year 7, we were talking and the vibe was just so strong. And so the word divorce got tossed out in a conversation, and which surprised me. She tossed it out there, and I'm just like, well, you made me promise never to divorce you, so I don't know what to think about this, and so on. And so it was unexpected. I never intended myself to get divorced. So one of the first things that God's Spirit spoke to me, though, when we started talking was, he said, your spouse is not your problem. Your inability to love your spouse well is the problem. And then he said one of the most heartwarming things I've ever had God say to me. He said, I'm working on the problem. And so I realized, I'm not in this alone. And my goal or my place in things was never to get her to change. It was to allow God to change my heart. So we were separated from December to October. Our divorce was final toward the end of October in 2010. And I moved out in December, got my own place, and God just kept working and just kept telling me to choose marriage. And she kept trying to get me mad, trying to get me to divorce her. And I'd come out of prayer. I'd pray for her, not about her. I would genuinely go to God and just pray for him to work in her heart and give her grace. She really struggled. God gave me a lot of compassion and mercy towards her to see that she was really, really struggling with the decision because she wasn't sure where that would leave her faith-wise. I was her second marriage. And so God just kept working in my heart and giving me grace to continue loving her.
I know that's one of the things I think that is the hardest for us to have grace toward the other person. And I think that's powerful that you were able to pray for her and not about her, not, trying to get God to change her, because it's what we all come from is like, change them so I can be happier. And I don't think a lot of us look at it that way.
I learned a prayer back in the early 90s on a walk to Emmaus. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I have some friends that's been on that.
Yeah. And one of my table leaders just gave me this short prayer. And it's just, if I did it in general, I'd say, God, give me grace to see others the way you do. Give me grace to hear others the way you do. Give me grace to receive others the way you do. The grace to respond to others the way you do. And then I added on the last little bit, which is really redundant because the first 3 cover it, but I say, God, give me grace to love others the way you do.
That's the ultimate, is to be able to love.
Yes. I started praying that in general, and God was blessing my heart. But then I started personalizing it, and I would pray for a person, and I'd put their name in there. So if I was praying for you, I'd say, God, give me grace to see Shari the way you see her, the grace to hear Shari the way you hear her, etc. And then I just remember the 4 words, see, hear, receive, respond. And I turn that into an acronym when I keep track of my prayers. And it's SHRR. And so I just call it my sure prayer. And so that's the way I track it. But as I prayed that, God would just fill my heart with part of him, which is interesting. I mean, when he answers that prayer, he doesn't tell you things as much as he just puts part of himself in you.
Yeah.
And that
Right.
changes your
That's
heart.
been my experience too. Let's go back just a little bit. So you married later in life.
45.
So was there a particular reason? Did you just want to know for sure that you wanted to be married, or the right person came along, or what kept you from getting married until that point?
So that's about a 2-hour story. But essentially, I grew up in a poster family for dysfunctional families.
No, yeah, a lot of
I had a father that was an alcoholic till I was 16, and I had a mother who did a lot of prescription drugs during the 60s.
in order to cope.
She
No?
just did them.
She did for
And she was a
recreation then.
very bitter
I see.
person that held on to every slight, and she vented her anger on me a lot. She was very abusive. She was spiritually abusive. She was emotionally abusive, physically abusive, mentally abusive. I mean,
Wow.
just every way that you can abuse another person. I grew up with that. And by the time I was 10 or 12, I had hardened my heart emotionally, didn't want to let myself feel love because love makes you vulnerable. And if I was vulnerable around her, then I would get hurt emotionally. And she wasn't like that 24/7. I mean, it was more challenging than that because she wasn't consistent. I just
So you
never
never
knew
knew.
who my mother would be when I
Yeah.
walked in the room.
And that's usually the way it is with addicts. They are hard to read, and you never know when they're going to be triggered.
And so when I graduated high school, and my mom was very, very controlling. And so when I was getting out of high school, I had decided I didn't want a woman telling me what to do. I didn't want anybody exercising control over me. And I had female friends, but I didn't have relationships with women, not a real relationship. We'd party and stuff, but I never opened my heart. And then when I was 27 and I got serious about following Christ, God spoke to my heart one day while I was in prayer and told me to ask him for a wife. And it was just such a out of the left field kind of thing. I'm like, why? And
You gotta
God's
be
like,
kidding.
yeah. He's like, well, just ask. I'm like, okay. So I started asking him for a wife. And 3 or 4 months later, he said, well, you want a wife, so tell me what you want. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, what do you want in a wife? I'm like, well, just one of those women things. And he said, no. He says, what do you want? And I gave God what I call my all-American version of the perfect woman, which came down to physical attributes and a willingness to have lots of sex. And
That's
God said,
pretty normal.
God said, we need to work on your values. And so for the next couple of years, God started showing me what makes women valuable. And still getting choked up over it. And the first thing he showed me, I delivered furniture at the time, and we carried a sofa into a house and set it down where the old sofa was. And I looked at the end table next to the sofa, and there was a doily on it. So then I got so choked up because I thought only a woman puts a doily on an end table. And I excused myself, went back out to the truck to get ready for the next stop. But I really wanted to go and just collect myself because I got out there and I was just, bawling my eyes out. It's like, oh my God, only a woman puts a doily. And then I started, when we would go into houses, I just became very aware of the difference between a home that has a woman in it and a home that doesn't. And then
this is amazing how God reaches us and just really subtle things, and it's nice that you were able to recognize that so quickly.
So over about a 10, 12-year period, God took me through a series of relationships to teach me how to have genuine relationship with women. And the first one, I started having feelings, and it just scared the living crap out of me because it's like, oh my God, I'm getting vulnerable. And that just meant she's going to rip my soul to shreds. And God started teaching me that most women are not the way my mother was. And so when I was in my early 40s, 42, 43, I really started wanting to be married. And I had been doing singles ministry in churches for a long while. And so I met my first wife, and we ended up getting married
And so where did you meet your first wife?
through the singles ministry.
Oh, okay.
I was
So technically
leading,
you met her at church then.
yeah, I was leading a singles ministry at Crossroads Christian Church in Lexington.
Mm-hmm.
And I started a small group, which it ended up being kind of funny. The church had women's groups called Heart Talk groups. And I started this small group, and the people that came was 4 women, or 3 women, and one of them was my wife. And they told me about 6 months in that I should go talk to the women's director of the women's ministry because I was leading a Heart Talk group, and I needed to. God had taught me to be relational, right? And
Yeah.
so I do small groups that way. It's about building relationship, not about kicking those around. So
yeah.
I met her in that context.
So you technically weren't actually looking for a wife at church. I'm like you didn't intentionally start that group or.
No, my radar was on, my antennas were out. I was hungry. But I was also just prayerfully trying to discern God's direction and God's will.
Yeah.
So I was kind of looking, but I was still healing. He's still working in my heart. I've got wounds that are still present. I've got behaviors that I learned when I was a kid that I catch myself. It's like, oh man,
Yeah. I think the biggest
healthy
thing is being aware of it and being willing to change or have the desire to. We all have those things that we fight with, and you're pretty normal. Has anybody ever told you that?
Actually, most people tell me I'm not normal.
So when did you actually do the book series, The Spirit, the Scribe, and the Journey?
In 2018, I researched how to do video stuff and podcasting stuff. And then in the beginning of 2019, I started trying to I wanted to learn how to publish on Amazon. That was my goal. And so I started working on a book on prayer, and I got stalled. And then I had some small short stories, and I didn't quite have enough. So I was working on that, and I got stalled. And then one day I looked at the bookshelf, and it's like, well, I've got some journals. I've got the content. All I got to do is transcribe it. So around September of 2019, I started transcribing, and I discovered 2 things real quick. One, I didn't realize I had 40 journals, so I had a lot of content. And the other was, as I started transcribing, then I became aware of what I had actually journaled. And I just got caught up in it. And it took me 4 months to transcribe it. And then it did take long to publish them once I got it set up. And I'd done a lot of desktop publishing. And so formatting the books and everything was pretty simple.
Yeah.
But it was in 2019 when I published them.
And so what was it that prompted you to do that? I mean, like, why do your journal?
Well, the journals was just, I had the content. I kept getting stalled. So I'm like, I've got content and I don't care about the content. What I care about is learning how to publish.
I gotcha.
And so since I had the content, and these books are just all over the place with topics. I had some friends that were like, man, you need to organize this better. And it's like, I'm not going to take 6 months to organize that into topics and so on.
Well, I mean, when we're journaling, definitely, I mean, I'm like that too. It's all over the place. And if somebody went back to read it, they'd be like, what did she do? Why did she say that? But like you said, it's for me at the moment. And if they can be useful to somebody else later, that's okay. But whenever I'm doing a Bible study or a devotional, I don't particularly like the ones that are so structured and, exactly the prayer to say. I like for me to figure out what God is saying to me at the time, because he's really the one that's teaching and guiding us through those. So I'm really looking forward to these, and I appreciate, your heart when you did this. And obviously it was some time ago, and now we're working on something else. What you had mentioned it. What was it that you are working on now? What's your next one?
Well, I've got about 10 works in progress. I'm focused more right now on video stuff. I have a Bible study that I'm leading guys. I go to Blackburn Prison on Sunday nights, and I'm leading guys through a study of all of the commandments of Jesus in the Gospels. And that started out of a conversation with a couple friends about evangelism and stuff. And in the Great Commission, Jesus said, go and teach them to observe everything I've commanded you. And so I like to ask Christians now, what did Jesus command us to do? There's 120 commandments in the Gospels.
Right.
And that's not...
And we only think of 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those weren't Jesus's commandments necessarily.
Yeah. So I read through the Gospels. I documented everything I thought was a command or could be interpreted as a command. I then harmonized it. So if the same one showed up in more than one gospel, I didn't count it twice. I just put it in a spreadsheet and I just listed the verses where it was found and then put it all together. And so I'm about halfway through the list with the guys at the prison. And with that, I'm going to do a series of videos and podcasts on the commandments of Christ. So, that's 120 minimum. And I've got one of the things that has happened is as I've done that is I keep coming back to the question, who is the commandment giver? I just keep getting this gut feeling if you don't understand the commandment giver, you're not really going to understand the commandments and so on. And then one other thing that's been yielded from that is I've taken my focus off of what happens after death, going to heaven or hell, and put my focus on which kingdom do you want to be a part of? Because Jesus talks about that in John 3. He says that, the Son didn't come to condemn people, but he came to set them free. And he says, but this is the condemnation. The light has come into the world, but men love darkness rather than light. So we have these two kingdoms, and Jesus came to set us free from the kingdom of darkness. And I think that's present tense. I'm going to heaven when I die, but my attention is not on that. My attention is on which kingdom do I want? And all of us, we have this thing called sin in us, which to me is not our behaviors. We have sin that tempts us and tries to pull us away from God's best. And we make a decision about, do we want to be a part of that kingdom, the kingdom of darkness, or do we want to resist that kingdom and be a part of the kingdom of light? So that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Great. Well, I guess our listeners probably want a little more about your journey through the divorce. And I know there's lots of questions out there, but me not being a man, you might have to kind of go ahead and say what's on your heart and what you think that other men might need to know. What were some of the things that you went through, questions and feelings, emotions, and that kind of thing?
Well, I thought about that, and I realized people always are in one of three places when divorce begins. Either they want divorce or they don't want divorce. So that's one of the two places that they can be in. And then a third place, and so you can have one person wants divorce, the other person doesn't want divorce, which is normal usually. Or you can have a situation where both people want a divorce. And you can have a situation where neither one of them wants divorce. They just see it as being inevitable.
Yeah.
They realize
they don't know what else to do.
We're not ever going to resolve things, which the closer you draw to God, like I say, I prayed for my wife every day that we were separated for 10 months in the morning and in the evening. And God just kept filling my heart with love. I'd take her flowers, and she was just like, stop loving me.
So you all never did reconcile?
No, she told me she had hardened her heart. And what she really wanted to do was stay married but live separate lives. And as soon as she said that, the Holy Spirit's like, no, that's not a marriage.
Right.
That's a legal marriage. And this is one of the things I learned is there's a difference between legal marriage and heart marriage. And really, rather than saying legal, I would say covenant marriage. But our society doesn't understand covenant.
I agree with that.
And everything. But So a man, when you're at the front end of a marriage dissolving, officially dissolving, it can be, people divorce in their hearts a long time before
Yes,
they ever divorce
that's true. Very
legally.
true.
But if a man is not the one initiating it, you're just going to go through a whole plethora of emotion and thoughts. Guys typically are going to withdraw into their cave to try to figure out what's going on, which is impossible because women are not easily understood by men.
And vice versa.
Yes. And so a guy is not going to turn to his buddies and say, hey, this is going on, because a guy, once again, you got to be vulnerable to do that. And guys like to be able to figure the stuff out and make it happen. Women tend to press into relationships because talking with someone else, they discover things. Guys will too if they do that, but typically they want to withdraw away from everyone and just deal with stuff. And some guys can be dealing with it emotionally. Some it just could be mental. And they're going to go through all of the same questions that women go through. How are we going to divide the stuff? Who gets the money? Who gets the retirement? Who's going to take care of the kids? How are we going to manage the kids? And life just gets complicated. And so how a person responds to all that stuff just comes back to their maturity and the healthiness of their soul. If they're immature and stuff, they can just get angry. And then who knows where their heart's going to go? Who knows how they're going to treat the children or treat the ex-wife? When I did singles ministry, I helped people walk through divorce. And I had one guy that he had been separated for 5 years, and him and his wife refused to finalize the divorce. Every time they go to the judge, one of them would have a new something that they wanted to deal with. And finally, a judge just said, look, you guys are coming back in 3 weeks, and you will have a divorce finalized when you leave my courtroom next time. He said, go talk to your attorneys and come back and decide what that looks like, because it's over, you know? And he said, I'm not doing this anymore. And another thing too, that they can be involved, if either of them have a relationship outside the marriage that is meeting their needs, it's much easier for a person to let go of that and not deal with the shame and all that kind of stuff. You just like, well, they are the bad person because they're not giving me what I need. And God has taught me so much about all that stuff. I could talk to you for hours about relationship stuff.
The unfortunate thing is that a lot of marriages end because they've already done that. They've already found somebody outside the relationship. So they're not even willing to try any longer to work on that relationship.
Yes. And my ex-wife, she didn't have somebody else. She just a very introverted person. She said she just wanted to come home to an empty house. She didn't want to have people, you know? And I said, well, I can give you space. And she just didn't want to be married.
Yeah, she just didn't want that relationship.
So, but I think just to help women understand, if a guy is not the one initiating a divorce, he's going to go through a lot of the same emotions that a woman goes through, but his thinking and his processing all of that will happen differently.
And his behavior.
Yes. Men are physical when they deal with pain. Women are more relational.
Did you feel a lot of guilt by not being able to save your marriage? Or
no? God told me to choose marriage and to honor her decision. And I had genuine peace. And I told her that. I said, I'm not expecting you to stay married. I want to stay married. If you don't want to stay married, God told me to honor your decision and to let you do what you want to do. But I'm not going to go file papers. And that ticked her off because she wanted me to be the one to file papers.
Yeah, I know lots of couples that are like that. The one doesn't want to be the one to say that they filed. They, for some reason, don't want that blame.
Well, with her, it was more that her philosophy of marriage is the man initiates everything. And so in her mind, if we were going to divorce, it was my responsibility to file for divorce.
I see.
And I said, I'm not going to choose divorce. God told me to choose marriage, so I'm going to choose marriage. And I did right down to the end. And she was just like, dang, nabbit.
But so you actually had a lot of peace that you had made the right decision, or you had basically honored her by honoring God.
hmm And so I had that, but I still had pain. I
Of
didn't
course.
know
Yeah.
I had pain. I went to a New Year's party a couple months after our divorce, and I really wasn't dealing with much emotionally. And
Mm.
I thought, I'm just going to put everything in my car and I'm going to drive west until I just stop.
Uh-huh.
And the Holy Spirit said, no, that's not a decision to make when you're in this place of pain. That's a huge life change. You need to stay put until you've healed enough to make a rational decision about that. And I shared that with one of my pastor friends, and he said, dude, that's a really wise
Yeah.
piece of advice. I'm like, well, God is wise. And so
Now, were you here in Lexington? Okay.
I said, well, I need to put down roots. So I thought I had an opportunity to buy into a business. So I thought about doing that. But then I said, well, I could buy a house. Either one will make it hard to just leave, but buying a house makes it harder. So I bought a house.
Uh-huh.
And it forced me to stick around. And I went through healing, but I went to this New Year's dance and I left after about a half an hour. I was just weeping in my car because it was just real and it was painful. And I didn't realize that I had that pain, which is normal for guys. Guys don't feel the emotions the way women do. And because of the trauma I went through as a child, I had shut emotions down. I just don't feel a lot of emotions because I don't like emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes you feel really vulnerable, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, how do you think that most guys feel about themselves when they get a divorce?
Well, it just comes back to one, are they the one initiating it? Or two, are they the one that did not initiate it? And three, do they have relationships outside of the marriage? Because sometimes guys don't want to get divorced, but the wife says, well, you've been committing adultery and I'm not sticking around.
Right.
And then they realize what they're losing.
Yeah.
So guys, they just deal with it. It's who they are in the moment. No two people are the same. We all can be put into some categories, but none of us is the same as anybody else.
So, what would you say to a man listening who feels like he's lost everything, maybe even his own sense of identity?
If a man is a Christian, he can definitely lean into God. If he's not a Christian, that's a scary place to be because most guys, they identify themselves by what they've done in life, by what they've accomplished. We have seasons that they've documented, and so on. And typically in his 40s, a man begins to evaluate his life against other men. And he looks at himself as being valued and successful by what he's done. And so the more you've climbed up the corporate ladder, the better a guy feels about himself.
Right.
Most guys never use relationships to gauge whether they've been successful or not. And once again, if a guy divorces, he comes back to, did they initiate it? Initiate it by saying, I want a divorce, or choosing to do stupid stuff, knowing that they were taking a risk of being divorced as a result of it. Or did it just happen to them? I've known guys that their wives had affairs.
Right. Of course.
Yeah. And people are people. They do what they do. And sometimes we beat ourselves up trying to figure out the why, which we all do. It's always a grief process. Even though I didn't initiate our stuff and I had peace about it, I went through a grief process.
Yeah, I did.
And the first is denial. This isn't happening. The second is you get mad because you don't have control over it. The third is you begin to bargain and try to, keep stuff. And then you go into depression. And then finally you go into acceptance. And there is no way to predict how long any of those stages are going to take place. And typically you bounce around between the first four until you come to a place of acceptance. In divorce, this is one of the things I recognized in dealing with people and ministering to them, is that divorce is not like death. There's a finality to death that says you lost what you had. And the closest I've come to, I've dealt with that, But I came home one night and there were firemen in my bedroom in a 2-story house I lived in. And my first thought was, I've got all my guitar equipment. I've got this, I got that up there. I've got recording equipment. And my heart just sunk because fire doesn't forgive.
Mm-hmm.
If fire gets something, it's gone.
Yeah,
it's not like
right,
water.
right.
Water, you can salvage the pitchers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the way I think divorce feels to a lot of people, is that it's being burnt up. It's just, there's no recovery.
Mm-hmm.
But, I've known men that they're like, okay, I'm going through a divorce, and they just start hitting the bars and they try to medicate through relationships.
Women do that too.
Mm-hmm. And then they medicate through, with alcohol. They can go and start thrill seeking and all that stuff. But I think the healthy thing, first and foremost, is to recognize what you're experiencing. Mm-hmm. And, we talked about my books, The Spirit, the Scribe, the Journey. That is one of the best things you can do, is to start writing stuff out.
Yeah.
And my stepdaughter from my first marriage, she had a really bad experience with her father. And he hurt her really deep. And I said, something that'll help you is you can write a letter to your dad that you're never going to give to him. Mm-hmm. You just write the letter and you put in the letter how you feel, what he did to make you feel that way, how you want to respond to him, and so on. And she wrote it, a 2-page letter, wanted us to read it. We read it. And then a week later, she came back and said, Dad got the letter. And she decided to send it.
Oh,
and
goodness.
she really, in the letter, she said, you've trashed me as a person, but I'm okay. And I've got my friends that you don't like, but they're my friends.
Right.
And everything. So sometimes just writing stuff out gives you clarity. And you're always in a place of confusion. You're always in a place of what ifs. The famous phrase, woulda, coulda, shoulda, mm-hmm. And there's a guy, Terry Hershey, who has done a lot of divorce care. He's done a lot of singles ministry. But he said that when he would get somebody new in a divorce care group, he would tell them, this is your first night, so we're not really asking anything of you. You can sit and just listen. You don't have to talk. He said, next week, though, you need to be prepared to talk. Mm-hmm. And he says, we're giving you one chance to tell your story. Mm-hmm. And you get the whole night, if it takes you the whole night to share your story. But you're only going to be allowed to tell your story one time, because that's your past, that's your history. And we're going to focus on where you're going, not where you've been. And I saw that as I ministered to divorced folks, the more that you brought them out of the past, mm-hmm. and focused them on where they're going, the quicker they would heal and the healthier they would be. Because
I saw that too. I went to divorce care.
Okay.
And I did see that. There was one lady in particular, she just could not let go. She just couldn't. And she died a very bitter, unhappy woman.
Yes.
Felt so sorry for her.
The little thing that I PM'd you, the little chart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is one of the things that God showed me, because I tended to be unhealthy, mm-hmm. in the way I responded to hurting events, mm-hmm. which is what that's about. But on the healthy side of that, you let go of control of everything and you trust God, yeah. to avenge you, or do whatever needs to be. And part of that is because our vengeance is never righteous. Mm-hmm. Our vengeance is always rooted in the kingdom of darkness. Yeah. I'm going to get them back.
That's right. And it does nothing but bring you the pain.
Yeah.
You don't hurt them. You hurt yourself more than anything else.
Well, no, you can hurt them.
Yeah,
and then they hurt
but it
you,
hurts you the most.
And then you hurt them, and then they hurt
mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah. You never can move forward if you're constantly thinking that. But I mean, I think that from what you're telling me, that men and women are not really that different. They just express emotions differently. But all those things that you described, I went through, and I know most people that I talk to do. I think the biggest problem is that we feel like that we have to reconcile with them if we're to really forgive them. And the reality is you just have to release it to God. You don't have to go to them. You don't have to actually talk to them about anything, you just got to get rid of that hatred and that bitterness and give it to God to do what he can for you. And it does also help to be in prayer for the other person, like you talked about. No matter how you feel about them, you still want their relationship with God to be reconciled as a Christian. So those are things that I know I went through, and I know most people do, is that feeling that if I forgive them, then I have to, have a relationship with them, or I have to, actually be nice to them, or what, and that's one of those things that's hard to do.
Yeah. And most of the time, people want closure on their own terms.
Mm-hmm.
And
For
they
sure.
want something from the person for the pain they caused them. They don't want to forgive them. What they want is for the person to own up and
Say, I'm sorry.
they may not even accept that.
That's true, but we do want, I don't know, I think we feel that if they actually cared enough to say, I'm sorry, it would make you feel a lot better.
Yes, and it would.
Yeah.
But, my relationship with my mom was a very violent relationship growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not trust her. I did not allow myself to feel any emotion towards her, positive emotions. I never allowed myself to feel love. And I visited her one evening, and God showed me that my mother was a broken and a bitter person. And he showed me that she gave me her best shot as a mother, even though it wasn't good. Right. She was taught how to be a mother by her mother. Mm-hmm. And her mother was taught how to be a mother by her mother. And so I recognized that my mom was given a tool chest with mothering techniques in it. And that's all she had to work with. And God just gave me grace. Everything in me, all this animosity and stuff, it was like a vapor that just went whoosh and was gone. God released me from everything I was holding against her. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, well, now we can have a healthy relationship. And I discovered over about a 6-month period of time that my mom was not healthy relationally. She was just not a healthy person emotionally and stuff. And I had to recognize the difference between forgiving her and loving her and trusting her. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have to trust her. And I learned what kind of relationship we could have. And it was a surface relationship. We never dealt with any real stuff. Mm-hmm. And I learned that a relationship is only as healthy as the least healthy person in the relationship. And the healthier you are, the more you allow the other person to be unhealthy. And then you establish your boundaries with the person. And sometimes you can't be in a relationship with someone that has wronged you and refuses to deal with that. With my mom, I chose to go ahead and be in a relationship with her, but I've had other folks that because of that experience, I've come to realize they don't get to be a part of my life anymore if their behavior doesn't change. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to have relationship with them if their behavior doesn't change.
Right. Exactly.
It's a privilege. I give you a privilege to be in relationship with me as you do with me. Mm-hmm. And
I like that. Thank you, John. So we've talked about the pain and the processing. So what about the future? How do men start to move forward with purpose?
Part of that just comes down to their own self-esteem. Mm-hmm. If a person has a strong sense of personal value, they know they have value, mm-hmm. and they have been devalued, they have self-respect, and they know they've been disrespected, and so on, they're going to move forward very differently than someone who has a victim mentality. Mm-hmm. And so the healthy thing for a man to do is first draw near God, mm-hmm. right? Spend your time in prayer, spend time in the Word, be in community with men who can speak into your life. Mm-hmm. There's a book called Finding a Date You Can Keep by
I've heard of that.
Henry Cloud. And one of the things he says in there that when you're getting into a relationship, you're not thinking clearly. It's impossible to think clearly because you got all those endorphins, all that stuff going on. Yeah. You're with the most wonderful person in the world. Mm-hmm. And he said, you need to have a group of people you really trust that you call the tie me to a tree group of friends. And their role is to keep you from doing stuff that's way stupid.
Yeah.
And so if a man doesn't have those relationships, he needs to connect. And for myself, being a Christian, I would say, go talk to your pastor and say, look, I need to be in a small group. I need, and so on. And pastors can help you get connected into men's ministry if they have one, or you can go to a larger church. They tend to have more affinity groups. And so getting involved in something like that where you can have those relationships, you definitely want to keep boundaries with women for a while after you've done that, because you're vulnerable. And on a side note, if a woman's gone through divorce, men have a responsibility in the eyes of God to protect her when she's willing to do things that you just know are going to mess up her life. A man needs to put up a boundary and say, no, I won't do that with you. I won't offer you that part of me because you need to heal. You're not healthy. And all we're going to do is stir up the pain.
That's a maturity that not many people have.
Yep.
And you had brought up the very real thing about men tend to feel disrespected or need to be respected. Women need to feel love. And those are the two actions that I think clearly leads to divorce, because women can't respect a man that doesn't make her feel loved, and vice versa.
And the challenge is nobody does marriage or relationships well. Even the best of us are not doing it well, right? Because we just don't do it well.
We're just human.
One of the questions I've kicked around for the last 10 or 12 years is, what really happened in the Garden of Eden? And the more I process on that, it's kind of like I go through little seasons where I get clarity on that, and then I don't think about it for a while, and then it's like, oh, I get clarity. And one of the things that I've come to understand is that there is something within all of us that God didn't put there, that whatever it was that was in the fruit that they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it changed our hearts, and it introduced evil into our hearts. And we are just not able to be the person God intended us to be.
Right.
And so on. The other thing is, with marriage, if people could really understand that they're entering covenant, our society used to recognize that. Divorce was not an option if you go back before the 1950s, 1940s.
Right.
My parents had a really, really bad marriage. Just keeping that in mind, that you just got to be willing to, one, own up to your stuff, and you don't ever have to confess that to anybody, but you do need, that's where journaling comes in. God can really begin to give you self-revelation where you realize, okay, I did these things that had an effect on the marriage, and then you can own those things. And if you don't do that, the reality is you're going to go into another relationship and do the same stuff. And so self-awareness is very important as you move forward.
I would definitely agree with that. Well, I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. And I know that there's a lot of women that's going to listen to this because they are always wondering what the man's thinking and how they, are actually feeling, which is hard for us to get from the other person when we're in that. Very few people after the fact talk about what happened and own their own part.
And when I was going through my separation and when I got divorced, I never really got a straight answer as to why she was making the choice she was making.
Right. Yeah.
She just didn't give it up. And I wanted to fix the marriage, make it healthier. And she just wouldn't let me do it. And so that gets frustrating. But God gave me peace in that. He's like, she's not your problem, right? Your spouse is not your problem. Right. So let me work in your heart. Let me fix the problem in your life. And you just let her go. You let her be who she wants to be. And if she wants me to work in her heart, she'll ask me. But she had hardened her heart. She had made up her mind. And, which happens a lot in marriage. She had already created her own secret bank accounts.
Yeah.
She wasn't any longer putting savings in our mutual savings account. She had taken her savings out of that account and put it in a different account. So when we got divorced, she was like, all that money in that account is yours. I was like, well, where's yours? And she said, well, I have mine.
Uh-huh.
And so a lot of times people, and that comes back to the reality that people divorce in their hearts a long time before they ever do it legally.
Yeah. Well, I do know that sometimes that is illegal to do those kind of things, but that's a whole other conversation there. But it's this has been enlightening to me. I really appreciate this. So we had talked a little bit about the journals. You also have a YouTube channel. What is that? What is the name of that?
The current one is the same as the books, The Spirit, The Scribe, The Journey.
Mm-hmm.
And they can find it by just typing in at The Spirit, The Scribe, The Journey.
Okay.
And I think it's all one big long thing. I don't think it has commas and everything. And right now with that, I've got 25 videos up there. And those, The Spirit, The Scribe, The Journey, when I went back through my journals, I had sermon notes and all kinds of stuff in there. I really tried to focus on what are the lessons that God's Spirit has taught me and what are the experiences I've had. And so with the video, some of the stuff I do in the video is in the book. Some of it is just other experiences that I never journaled, but I remember them.
Yeah, just right off the cuff there.
And then I'm going to be putting a new YouTube channel and podcast out there called Son of a Pair. My last name is Pearson. And so for a long time, I've told people, if you want to remember my name, just remember I'm the son of a pair.
Yeah.
And it sticks. And so everybody I've told that to, that I'm going to name a podcast and a YouTube channel that, they're like, that's good. They don't know what it means. But
no, but it's still, it would catch attention.
Yeah.
And I can see you could do a lot with that. So your ministry, is that Before Eternity? Is that the ministry? Okay.
Yeah, if people want to visit my website, it's beforeeternity.com. And if the letter B, the number 4, and then the word eternity.
Okay, good. You had mentioned another book series you're working on that I remember I prayed. Is that what it's called?
That is actually a prayer journal that I put together.
Okay.
I
got a copy of that too, don't I?
Yeah.
Good.
I recognized that there are a lot of Christians who say one of two things about prayer. I don't know how to pray, or I don't know what to pray for. And so I put together a prayer journal to help people develop and maintain a consistent prayer life. And it's the most important thing in the whole thing is you have a place where you can put a date and a time. And that's not when you sit down to do it. It's like a day timer. You write in the next time that you're going to pray. So you're intentional about your schedule. But in it, it's got different topics that you can, and the first thing you do in it is you take a few days or a week or two, and you think about what you want to pray about over the next 90 days. The people you want to pray for, whether they're Christians or non-Christians, whether you're praying about world missions or you're praying about politics or the government and stuff. And you document all that in the beginning. And then when you go to pray on a given day, you can go, if you don't know what you want to pray that day, you just go back to that place where you set all that up and you look at the names of Christians. And it's like, well, I'm going to take these 2 out of a list of 20 and I'm going to pray for them today. Right? It's just a way to stimulate your mind. And so the first part of it is like a journal. I remember. So you journal what happened yesterday. And then the bottom part of it is I prayed, and you just document what you pray. And it's not meant for like 4-hour prayer things. I would never discourage somebody from that. But if you've got 15 to 30 minutes, it's just a tool. So it's a good tool to help people establish and maintain a consistent prayer life. So, and that's out on Amazon. Both the journals are out on Amazon, and this out on Amazon.
Well, John, thank you for being here and for reminding all of us, men and women, that God's voice is still speaking even in the aftermath of divorce.
Amen. Thank you.